The final battle of Avengers Endgame was a tragic waste of potential. Now, just before you hit that dislike button, let's get one thing straight. Overall, the end of Avengers Endgame was outstanding. Iron Man sacrificed, Captain America going back in time, the portal scene, the fight with the big three duked out with Thanos, all of that was just a fantastic spectacle. I mean, if you tell me that you didn't have the biggest smile on your face when Captain America picked up Mjolnir, you're either a liar or just not a human being. But this video essay, it is not talking about that. Rather, it's about this. So first we get the portal scene, and it is bone-chilling. We have this great shot of the entire MCU lining up for their very final fight, and it is awesome. This portal scene left me on the edge of my seat in anticipation for this epic battle that was about to take place. I mean, the entire MCU has been building up to this moment. This is going to be one of the most epic battle scenes ever created. And after this outstandingly well executed build-up, we see everyone run up at each other, and I was left profoundly disappointed, because we didn't get this nail-biting climax of epic, celestial proportions that had every last viewer nervous beyond belief for the fates of these characters that we love. Instead, we had a 5-minute scene of these 100 or so characters just punching and blasting their way through a CGI army. A fight where at very few points does it actually achieve the strong dread that any good climax needs. And if the Russos were trying to create said dread in this battle, maybe they didn't completely fail, but they seriously could have done a far better job. Because the epic finale to the largest franchise in cinematic history is essentially the same scene we've all seen before 100 times, just with, instead of a few characters involved, a few hundred this time. And okay, I imagine a fair few of you are already making the entirely valid point, but don't you see? This scene doesn't have to be a masterpiece of a battle because it is a celebration of all that's come before. The moment is great because of all the groundwork, all the films and character arcs that have made this moment possible. They are the reason this scene is a good one. Now that is a very good point, and it's a very correct point. However, that point is exactly the problem. Because the reason why this scene is good is because of all the work that's come before it. And if you strip away all of the context, so you are just left with this battle scene in itself, this scene doesn't do anything new. And in terms of battles we've seen before on our screens, like the Battle of the Bastards, the opening of Saving Private Ryan, the Battle for Minas Tirith, the end of Avengers Endgame doesn't even hold a candle. I mean, when you look at the Siege of Helm's Deep, for example, the plot to destroy the One Ring, the character arcs, the world building, and all of the great storytelling done before the scene begins, that's only one part of the many reasons why the Siege of Helm's Deep is such a legendary battle. The main reason why is because this whole battle, on a craft level, it's a masterpiece, and it does so many things right that the end of Avengers Endgame got wrong. And this, of course, presents the question, why did the Siege of Helm's Deep feel so grand and epic and nail-biting, while the climax of Endgame, well, just didn't do that? How do you make an epic fight epic, and how do you make it, well, not? There are several things that the Battle of Avengers Endgame fails to do, and the foremost is this. Making a great fight scene is just like any scene in your story. It is like telling a story in miniature. You can't do what a child does with his toys. You can't just grab all of your characters, throw them into a field together with no clear rhyme or reason as they duke it out, then all of a sudden one side wins the battle in a single move. In order for an epic battle scene to be at its most engaging, it needs to be structured like its own story, and the more epic the battle, the more complex that story needs to be. When you look at the Siege of Helm's Deep, you can see exactly this in action. We have the exposition beforehand. We know who the characters are, we know why they're fighting and why the attackers are trying to kill them. We have surveyed the battlefield. We know what the fort looks like with the ramps and the gates and the overall defences. We know that the attackers are aware of a weakness in the fort, that being a drainage gate that they plan to exploit. We have the calm before the storm as the enemy slowly marches forwards. We have the inciting incident as one of the archers accidentally kills an orc. Then throughout the fight we have this rising action as the fight progresses and the orcs overwhelm the defenders more and more as they reach towards their breaking point. And I won't labour the point, but the whole siege of Helm's Deep could have been its own contained short film because of its brilliantly executed structure. But honestly, the big one, the main reason why, in my opinion, the Siege of Helm's Deep is such a compelling battle scene and why Endgame is less so, is that very ingredient that I just mentioned. The ingredient of progression. And if you ask me, whenever a battle scene fails to be compelling, it's usually for this exact reason. I mean, throughout the Endgame fight, we see the heroes kill some of Thanos' goons. Then we see them kill some more of Thanos' goons. Then more. Then more. Then more. And what I think is really damning is for the first 2.5 minutes of this battle, nothing actually happens. For a whole lot of whiz and bang and fighting and punching, a whole lot of nothing actually comes from it. The dynamic of the fight in the first 2.5 minutes never shifts to any one side's favour. I mean, the battle doesn't even have a beat to its story until far into it when they mention, oh hey, by the way, we need to get the gauntlet to Ant-Man's van. And finally, after 2.5 minutes of punching, the characters actually have a goal they need to achieve, which gives the fight at least some basic sense of a story. This lack of direction serves to make the epic battle feel the opposite of epic. I mean, Helm's Deep has a fantastic sense of progression, and how does Jackson create this feeling? Well, it's simple. Progression is signified by ground taken. Now, of course, this isn't the only way to do progression in a fight, but as the Siege of Helm's Deep moves along, we see the orcs charge the wall, they put up ladders and climb, and then they destroy the wall in this crushing blow to the heroes, which allows the orcs to come pouring into the courtyard and push further into the fort. And this carries on as the enemy pushes further in and breaks down line of defense after line of defense. Now, Endgame doesn't totally fail in this aspect. I mean, there is that one moment where Captain Marvel destroys Thanos' ship, and that does create a grand feeling of progression as the dynamic of the fight shifts. But overall, we have extremely few examples of this great grand change to the status quo as one side as a whole gets an edge over the other. And on this point, one of the main reasons why Endgame fails to feel truly epic is because it spends far too much time focusing on the micro. While other battles show the armies as a whole having successes and failures, Endgame only shows individuals having successes and failures. We have Scarlet Witch successfully attack Thanos and do a little damage. We see the Women form and kill a bunch of Thanos' goons, and we see Ant-Man kill one of Thanos' lieutenants by seemingly accidentally standing on him. And that right there is the problem, because the kind of little victories we see in the Endgame battle, those work well when you have a small contained action scene with only a handful of characters, but not so much when you have a battle involving whole armies of thousands of troops fighting one another. The whole idea of an epic fight scene is to have a grandiose scale and an equally grand sense of progression to go along with it. And if you fail to create that feeling of whole armies, not individuals making progress in your battle, you will undermine that epic feeling your battle otherwise could have had. I mean, here's a good question that strikes at the root of this problem. What does Thanos' army actually achieve in this scene? Remove Thanos entirely from the equation, so it's just his forces left. What objectives do his forces complete in this fight? And that is exactly it. his forces never do anything that actually affects the status quo of the battle. Thanos' army could have been several thousand mannequins standing still in a field as the Avengers fight them as if they were real foes, and the battle wouldn't have changed in the slightest for it. And after a little thought, I realised that the only reason Thanos' army is even on the field from a narrative perspective, aside, giving the excuse for a big fight, is to stop the viewers from asking the question, wait, so why didn't all the heroes just rush Thanos at the exact same moment? And that is a really poor basis for an epic battle. Every last bit of stake in the fight, the only true source of dread in this climactic battle, is what Thanos as an individual achieves, not his whole army as a collective getting closer to achieving a very tangible goal. This is a critical problem with Avengers Endgame, because if you really had to boil down this battle, it isn't actually about two armies fighting each other. This battle is a disguise. It's a front, or even worse than that, it's a setting. The same way the opening scene of Pulp Fiction is set in a diner, or the same way that Harry Potter is set in a medieval castle. And what is the setting of this battle for? A game of hot potato, where Thanos is chasing all the characters around the battlefield trying to get the gauntlet. This battle is not an epic one. It is a small-scale one between a handful of characters fighting over a MacGuffin, pretending to be something larger than it really is. And no matter how well that game of hot potato is depicted, it has a critical flaw, because it simply is not epic enough a premise for the climax of the largest movie franchise in human history. If you ask me, this film really would have benefited from the Russos spending more time learning about creative writing. I mean, they're great storytellers, there's no doubt about that, but even the best always have another area they can and should dedicate themselves to improve on. And that goes for you. Whether or not you're writing novels or screenplays or Sonic the Hedgehog fanfiction, if you dream about one day breaking into the industry and making writing your full-time job, you should always be on the lookout for more resources to improve your craft. And if you are a writer, a great audiobook I can't recommend enough is Save the Cat by Blake Snyder. For a listen that's just over 5 hours long, it gives out an impressive amount of actionable advice and frankly fascinating insights about the movie industry that I've learned a ton from. And you may be wondering, why on earth is Henry recommending an audiobook in the middle of his video on Avengers Endgame? Well, that's because it's a good audiobook. And also, Audible has ever so slightly sponsored today's video. But seriously, I adore Audible and listen to their audiobooks every day if I can help it. The reason why I adore Audible's service and pretty much exclusively listen to audiobooks at this point, rather than reading their paperback cousins, is because it's a fantastically easy way to optimize your time and fill in those mundane gaps of your life. So a great example, let's say that you're on your commute to work. You could sit in the car or train and just stare out the window for an hour more, or you could use that time to listen to an audiobook, get gripped in a brilliant story, or just learn a ton about your chosen subject. For me personally, the commute from my kitchen to my computer lasts all of 20 seconds, so I'm not sure how well those seconds would be spent listening to an audiobook. But what I like to do is listen to novels and writing related audiobooks just like this one while playing games, and that works out great for me. And if you click my link in the description, that's audible.com/closerlook, or if you text closerlook to 500 500, you will get any audiobook you like totally for free. Plus 2 Audible originals totally for free, plus a 30-day trial for free. When you sign up through either of those options, you'll get a credit for 1 free audiobook, and you can use it to get any audiobook you want in their massive library. But I recommend Save the Cat by Blake Snyder as a great place to start. One caveat about Save the Cat: while I adore Save the Cat and have learned a ton from it, the book does have a tendency to suggest all of the tips in it are rules, and that you simply must follow them, otherwise your story will crumble and fail. But if you put that aside and simply look at the advice as just guidelines for how to write a kick-ass story rather than the irrefutable laws of physics, you will learn a ton from it like I've done and improve your craft. And all you have to do to get started is click my link in the description, that's audible.com/closerlook, or text closerlook to 500 500 and you'll get this brilliant audiobook or any other one you like for no cost whatsoever. Anyway, back to Avengers Endgame. In the best epic battles, there is give and take. It's like a seesaw as we go from palpable dread to filled with hope, and back to palpable dread as that hope gets undermined. This is all a part of that grand story structure of the scene that we just talked about. So as the enemy gets closer to achieving victory, the heroes deploy a tactic that stifles the enemy's progression and gives hope that there's a fighting chance. Then the enemy shifts strategies and kills that hope. The orcs charge the fort, creating dread. The defenders loose arrows, killing many of the attackers and creating hope. The orcs put up ladders, creating dread. The heroes manage to kill those who climb and kick down the ladders, creating hope. But the orcs just keep raising more and overwhelm the defenders, creating dread. And then it gets even worse as the orcs place bombs at the base of the wall. Legolas tries to kill the guy with a torch, but fails, creating even more dread. And then the whole wall explodes in this soul-crushing development of this battle. The enemy has breached the wall and made a considerable amount of progress to securing victory on this seesaw of epic proportions. The whole of the Helm's Deep siege is just like this, never spending too long in that dark dread to overwhelm the viewer, never spending too long in hope and victory, as when you spend too long focusing on hope and victory, that in turn kills the terror of the moment. And when we see exactly this as an audience, we think, well, it's going to be okay. The Avengers will win this battle no problem because the past 3 minutes straight have been nothing but the heroes kicking the bad guy's ass in a very one-sided battle. In my opinion, the greatest epic battles out there, in Thanos' words, are
perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
They find a delicate balance between the two opposite feelings of hope and fear, and this is something that Avengers Endgame really falls flat on its arse with in the final battle. It is true that in this fight we have little moments of dread here and there. Thanos nearly getting the gauntlet towards the end, that does create dread. Spider-Man getting hit by the cannons from Thanos' ship, that creates dread too. But these sparse moments of hopelessness, they are utterly drowned in positivity and this feeling of victory, to the point of its own detriment. Although, now I say that out loud, I kind of realise how cynical that may sound. But here's an example of that. So, we have the admittedly hopeless moment where Thanos' ship is bombarding the characters. I mean, no characters we know are killed by this move in the battle, and the only real effect that this has is Spider-Man getting hit. But he does get up moments later, only slightly winded, so it's not really... But okay, to give credit, this is a hopeless moment. Then the ship turns all of its guns towards the sky, giving the characters some relief as there is this gush of hope. They open fire and do nothing to stop Captain Marvel as she barrels through Thanos' ship in this 40-second long sequence as all the characters look up and smile in this hope-filled moment. Then we immediately cut to Captain Marvel taking the gauntlet from Spider-Man, passing on the torch. This is yet another gush of hope. Then we have that diversity moment of all the women coming together, which is yet another gush of hope. Then all of those women kick absolute arse and kill a ton of Thanos' soldiers with incredible ease. This is another great gush of hope. I'm sure you can see the point I'm making here, because this whole 2-minute section of the battle provides an utterly huge amount of yin and absolutely zero yang to go with it. The heroes achieve victory after victory and deal with the situation so easily it actually kills our dramatic investment, because how can we feel afraid for our characters when all they do is win, win, win and overcome 10 hurdles in a row as if they were all only an inch tall? I mean, I'm a 22-year-old with limited writing experience living in my mum's house. I am no expert. But right off the bat, here's a better alternative for this sequence. So we have Captain Marvel arrive in the exact same way. She obliterates the ship and is doing a ton of damage to Thanos' army. So let's change the battle a little bit. So the Infinity Stones get separated at one point, and Thanos manages to get his hands on the Space Stone. And after Captain Marvel is done obliterating his fleet, she screams towards him, ready to take his head off, when Thanos simply waves his hand and, using the Space Stone, teleports Captain Marvel to the other side of the Milky Way. And she appears somewhere so outrageously far away that it would take her literal years just to travel back to Earth, which would be a really cool and creative way of using the magic system that they've already established in the Infinity Stones. So in this improved version of the fight, we have that victorious feeling of Captain Marvel's arrival, and all of a sudden, Thanos obliterates that hope by taking out the Avengers' most powerful member with a literal wave of his hand. What we've done here is we haven't radically altered what was in Endgame, we've just optimized it. Doesn't that sound so much more exhilarating to watch than 3 minutes of positive beat after positive beat? When you complement the positive moments with the negative like a never-ending sandwich, it makes any fight scene, or screw it, just any scene, so much more gripping. It makes the positive moments more heroic and the negative ones more soul-crushing, and it's something that the climactic battle of Avengers Endgame almost entirely fails to do. And if you thought I'd run out of reasons why the end battle of Avengers Endgame is flawed, mate, I haven't even started by this point. Because another flaw in the battle of Endgame, the viewer has an extremely poor understanding of the geography. So in Helm's Deep, the audience at all times has a comprehensive understanding as to where the characters are and what they're doing. Let's take this part of the siege, when the lower area is already breached and the orcs are trying to access the keep. We know that Aragorn and Gimli are at the ramp stalling the orcs so the defenders can barricade the door. We know that the orcs are trying to set up ladders to reach the keep, and Legolas is on the battlements trying to repel them. And the fact that Jackson establishes such a strong understanding of exactly where everyone is and what they're doing, it does more than just prevent confusion. It makes the twists and turns of the battle that come up later all the more satisfying. But how does this easy-to-grasp geography make the scene more satisfying to watch? Well, here's one example. While Aragorn and Gimli are exposed on the ramp, they are ordered by the king to retreat because the barricade has been re-established. But now, how the hell are they going to get out of there? They have a solid wooden door to their back and an army of orcs to their front. We feel genuinely worried for our characters as they seem to have no route of escape. Then Legolas appears up above and throws down a rope, saving their lives. And this, right here, makes for a really satisfying beat in the overall battle. And part of the reason this save by Legolas is so cathartic is because of the audience's comprehensive understanding of the geography. They know that moments before, Legolas was repelling the ladders right here on the battlements. So in the viewer's mind, it makes complete and perfect sense that Legolas is in the right place at the right time to save their lives, as all they'd have to do is run along, grab some rope and then throw it down. Because the audience completely understands where everyone is and what they're doing, it makes every beat of the fight more satisfying. But here's another similar moment in Avengers Endgame. So Black Panther gets hit by Thanos, so then Thanos charges in to finish the kill when Scarlet Witch flies down from the sky to save Black Panther's life. But there is something horribly wrong with this beat in the battle, because for some reason, that moment in Helm's Deep where Legolas throws down the rope is cathartic, and this moment in Endgame isn't even half as satisfying to watch. And why? Until this moment when she comes down from the sky, the audience has no idea where Scarlet Witch even is on the battlefield, and as a result of this poor understanding, this moment has zero foreshadowing. And when you reveal any form of twist in the story with zero foreshadowing, it always has a watered down effect as opposed to when it does. I mean, the moment of Captain America lifting Thor's hammer was powerful, but it would have been nowhere near as powerful if we had never had that moment in Age of Ultron when Cap nearly lifts the hammer but no one else who tried could. And that concept applies to everything in storytelling, including those little moments where in the heat of battle, a character leaps in to save another from a killing blow. When you provide no foreshadowing, at best your twist will be a meh moment that evokes little emotion in the audience. At worst, it will feel like lazy writing, and the audience will feel frustrated as they feel like they've been cheated by the fact that you pulled a mini Deus Ex Machina and saved your character's life in a totally unforeseen way. I mean, this moment of Scarlet Witch coming to Black Panther's aid, you could have replaced her with literally any of the other characters who are on the battlefield, and it would have made equally as much sense, because of how poorly this moment was set up, and that is a really damning thing to say. Now, for those of you out there who are long-time subscribers of this channel, you'll know that I hate being just a cynic. I hate to just criticise and not provide something constructive, so today let's use the end of Avengers Endgame as a case study for how to craft a really epic battle. So let's go one by one on the issues we've identified and apply a fix to them, so we can outline an improved version of this fight, all the while learning a few things along the way for our own writing. So, problem 1. This battle lacks a sense of progression. All we really have in this scene are two armies in a field punching each other until one side gets snapped away from existence. So let's take a page from Lord of the Rings book and say that the Avengers aren't meeting Thanos in a field, rather they are defending a location. Let's make it a siege. So how about we establish a few things first in this new battle? So first, we're going to change the rules ever so slightly. In order to use more than one Infinity Stone, you simply need to use the Infinity Gauntlet. If anyone even tries to hold more than 2 stones at any one time without the Gauntlet, they evaporate into dust almost immediately. Let's tweak the story just a little bit and say that the gauntlet Thanos had commissioned by Peter Dinklage is the only gauntlet in existence that can hold all of the stones. They took it off Thanos' body after Thor killed him at the start of Endgame, and that is the gauntlet that Hulk used to reverse the snap. And let's say that just after Hulk does the snap, Nebula, as she does in the film, lets Thanos through the portal, but then tries to steal the Infinity Gauntlet, and the Avengers manage to partially stop her plans as they take away the Infinity Stones before she can get the glove. So, before this epic battle has begun, the Avengers have all of the stones, and Thanos has the only device capable of using them. And the second thing we establish, Thanos existing in the future is a paradox. Forget alternate timelines and dimensions, this Thanos being here is a complete paradox. However, the Infinity Stones are enabling that paradox as they are from his time. If the Avengers can manage to repair the time machine that Nebula destroyed, then send the stones back to where they belong, then the paradox will be rendered impossible, and Thanos and his armies will be ripped away from our timeline and sent back to their own with no memory of the event. In effect, if the Avengers send the stones back in time, they win the battle. And all of a sudden, we have an improved premise. Tony and Bruce and Ant-Man are in the time machine room, desperately trying to repair the device, all the while Thanos and his army are sieging the Avengers compound, trying to reach the time machine before it can be reactivated. And already, this idea is a better one than the one we got, because it allows us to have a strong sense of progression as Thanos' army beats the Avengers and gets closer and closer to the time machine room. And the second problem we identified, this battle is not enough of an emotional roller coaster. We spend too long focusing on hope when we should have had a better balance with dread. So, how can we fix that? Well, firstly, let's add that idea of Captain Marvel destroying Thanos' ship, then being teleported to another galaxy. But also, how about we alter the story a little, so Black Widow actually survives her trip to acquire the Soul Stone, and is there at the final fight. So then, we get this heartbreaking scene where maybe she sacrifices her life to save Hawkeye or Captain America, but Bruce is watching the security feed, and he sees her die, and he just breaks down crying. But then, something snaps. He just breaks. He boils into a complete, total, feral rage, the likes of which we have never seen before. Unknowingly, Thanos had killed the person that Hulk loved the most, and as a result, made him more angry than he had ever been before at any point in history. And Thanos accidentally unleashes the true power of the Hulk that he'd been suppressing all of this time. So then Hulk charges onto the field and massacres his way through Thanos' forces in this epic switch as we get the tragedy of Black Widow's death, this truly sad moment, then the gush of hope as Hulk tears through Thanos' forces in retaliation. The more you fill the battle with moments like that, the more gripping and exhilarating that fight gets. But also, let's take another page from Lord of the Rings. So a great beat in the Helm's Deep siege is Gandalf, where he says he's going to fetch reinforcements for the upcoming battle. And he says to Aragorn midway through the film,
"Look to my coming, at first light on the 5th day. At dawn, look to the east."
Then, at the very height of the Helm's Deep siege, as the enemy has near total control over the fort and all hope seems lost, we see the sunlight of a new day spill through the window. Then, a few minutes later, the cavalry arrives on the hill and charges in this glorious hope-filled moment as the final beat of this battle. Well, how about we take the portal scene and just move it to happen a little later on in the fight. So immediately after Nebula steals the gauntlet and the Avengers begin their race to build the machine, Doctor Strange teleports by with Spider-Man and the rest of the guys from Titan and promises further reinforcements. He says that he'll go around and muster every last soldier he can find, but you can't just snap your fingers and have an army come all at once. Organising such a force takes time. He says, "Give me 2 hours. Then teleports away to gather the troops. Then, that way, when the battle is well underway and all hope seems lost, Thanos is knocking on the Time Room's door and Cap is facing him down, ready to die. We see a portal on the hill. Then several more, and before you know it, Doctor Strange is back with the reinforcements that he promised in this incredible hope-filled moment in the middle of such a dark one, where the Avengers have been all but totally defeated. When you have it in this way, you still have the same portal scene, but you place it in the middle of this well-structured, dread and hope-filled story. It makes the scene even more powerful than it already was, as it serves as another beat in this epic battle. But then, just as the whole MCU arrives in the battlefield, in this glorious moment, Thanos dispatches of Captain America, gets the Reality Stone, then the Time Stone, and adds them to his gauntlet. So now, sure, we have the whole MCU arrive as much needed reinforcements, but Thanos now has 3 Infinity Stones on his gauntlet. The last time he had 3 stones, the Avengers didn't even stand a chance. Does the entire MCU even stand a chance at beating Thanos at this point? That right there is how you structure an epic climax to the largest franchise in human history. Not with 5 minutes of punching a generic CGI army until they're all dead. And how do we sign off this epic battle? Every battle needs an apex, so what's ours? Well, it's simple. We take that fight we got in the film of Thor, Cap and Tony versus Thanos, and we simply shift it to take place in the teleport room right at the very end of this climactic battle. So this is the true climax of the film. When every other Avenger is defeated or too far away to help, we see the 3 original Avengers, the last line of defense, take the final stand against Thanos to decide once and for all the fate of the universe. So now, when Thanos is hurting Thor, and we get this moment where the hammer lifts and Captain America kicks Thanos' ass with it, I mean, that moment in Endgame was already exceptionally powerful. But now, in this new context, when it comes at the true all hope is lost moment, I don't think I need to tell you how unquestionably epic that would be. That is the reason why I was so disappointed with the end of Avengers Endgame, because that right there was the climax that we should have had. And honestly, what did we actually change in order to get this vastly improved version of the battle? Well, it's simple. All we did was make it so the Avengers were defending a location rather than just meeting in a field. We gave Thanos a very tangible goal and location that he slowly works his way towards achieving, and we complemented all of the positive moments with moments of dread. And when you know that we could have had that, It's such a crying shame that we were left with the one we got. Am I right or am I wrong? If you were in the place of the Russo brothers, how would you have done this scene? I'd love to know what you think in the comments down below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on The Closer Look.